Amen. One of the most wonderful books, I think, that deals with contemporary issues for us to look at, it sounds strange, but it's the book of Daniel. Not just with the prophetic aspects of it, but what Daniel had to endure. Remember, Daniel was in exile. He left Jerusalem, had to be taken to Babylon. And when he got to Babylon, one of the first things they tried to do is to turn him into a Babylonian. They said, hey, we're going to make you eat this certain diet. And Daniel could have said, no way, Jose, there's no way I'm doing that. You're not, and put his arms up and get ready to fight. But Daniel was very suave on how he did this. He said, well, hey, can you just work with me here? Let me try this for a week. If it doesn't work out, I'll go and do what you want. And Daniel turned out better than the others. And there's a thing there where Daniel was in Babylon, and he was almost like an ambassador of God's kingdom in Babylon. He wasn't purposefully antagonistic, but he also wasn't accommodating to him. Okay? But then it came other times. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were told, you must bow down and worship this idol of gold. Okay? They knew that that was against God's word. They were not supposed to do. So what do? They refused to worship. And because of that, they was thrown into the fiery furnace. Now we know how that ended up. That was great. Daniel also was told that he was not allowed to pray. And I always love to point this out. The enemies of Daniel set this up because they knew when he was told that he could not pray, they knew exactly where they would find him. Praying. And I say this because we are called to live as ambassadors of God's kingdom in this world. Not citizens of this world, but ambassadors of the kingdom. We're not to be purposely antagonistic. We're not to go out there and just make a stink of everything. Have you all known those folks who just think like because you belong to God that you should hate everybody and always be enemies of everybody? I've told you a story one time about when I was taking a class. It was Bible 101 when I was at the University of Southern Mississippi, and we had a man by the name of Grant, I believe his name was. He was a student, and he was just all ready to come and fight because he was at a secular university taking a Bible class, and he just knew that this was going to be a liberal professor, and he was going to go after him. Y'all, but our professor was a Southern Baptist minister. and he was about as conservative as you can be. And so no matter what he said, the student, Grant, was always ready to do battle. And even if he agreed with him, he was still fighting with him. Because he was taking his stand. Even before he listened to anything. So he was always just ready to go on to fight. But at the same time, there will be times where we're going to have to go against what we say, what the world does. So there are times when you will suffer for your beliefs. There will come a time when you will not fit in with everybody else. And there's also times when you will be very enticed to be like everybody else. Remember when we started this, we went to the 7 churches of Asia. And as we dealt with that, not everything was great. They were dealing with persecution, which persecution we could handle. Okay? In fact, I think persecution makes the church stronger. But the issue that was going on in many of the churches was immorality and basically the allurement of the culture. Wanting to be like everybody else. And this is where you start to see the appeal of the culture. There's a movie, and I had to look it up, and I had it on the screen, so I wish y'all could see. So it's one of those movies that, when I tell you the name, you probably won't remember it, but if I showed you the picture, you'd say, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. It's called a Bronx Tale. Y'all saw that? Okay. It was Robert De Niro's directorial debut. But, he always plays a rough and tough gangster. But in this one, he plays a father. And they're growing up in the Bronx. And the son basically falls in love with these gangsters. And he's looking at this gangster lifestyle. They have everything. They have the money. They have the power. They have the reputation. And the gangsters are grooming them and saying to this guy, hey, come on, hey, you can be great at this. And Robert De Niro was the dad trying to say, stay away from my kid. Stay away from him. He doesn't need to be in that lifestyle. But when the kid looked at his dad was just a hard-working, blue-collar man who was struggling to make ends meet. And then he's looking at these gangsters wearing nice suits, money to throw around, fancy cars, and all the girls. And he's like, I know this is wrong, but man, which lifestyle do I want to live? And I think that is the perfect way for us to dive into this understanding of whose side we want to be on. The lamb or the dragon? Do we want to belong to the New Jerusalem or to Babylon? The bride or the prostitute? And we're going to see that. We say, yes, of course we're going to be with the New Jerusalem. Of course we're going to be with the bride. Of course we're going to do all this. And sometimes that thing pulls you. It entices you. That's what John said in 1 John 2:15. He says, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of the sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. The book of Revelation shows us lots of things. The victory of the Lamb. It shows us the pulls the veil, the mask off, and shows us what's going on in the world. That the dragon's involved, and we see all these powers at work. But it also tells us we have to make a decision. And so chapters 17 and 18, and believe it, we're going to be ambitious. We're going to try to do both chapters tonight. Okay? Because there's so much that kind of repeats. But it shows you an image of the dragon's world and the impact it has on the people of God. And then the reaction people have when it falls. And so it's one of those strange chapters because it comes at the end of, you have all the destruction of the 7 bowls. But it's almost like after the 7 bowls, it is done. You go backwards to see it from another perspective. And it shows us not just how things end, but the response of how things end. And the reaction. And it's one of those things where you're like, how in the world could y'all think that? Because we're going to look about how, and that's my prostitute. She's modestly dressed. That's what you call an Amish prostitute. But we're going to look at all the things she does and the beast and how evil they are and all this. But when they finally are fallen, you think that people are going to say, hip, hip, hooray! But no, they cry, and they mourn, and they're weeping. You're like, don't you know what evil is? And it says a whole lot of, and when you read it in the context, when you look at it, man, you're like, I understand the world now. I understand how the world is. So, what I want us to do is we're going to go through chapter 17 and 18, and then we're going to break it down. But in your bulletin, I believe, and you can be a copy of it, you have a list of the main characters, okay, in this chapter. So, These are just some understandings of who these folks are, just to kind of give you a glimpse. And we are going to dive into each thing, but again, my main purpose tonight is for us to see the main point it's trying to get across. Okay? So, y'all turn to Revelation chapter 17. And this is going to be long. I'm going to read both chapters. so y'all don't fall asleep. Buckle up. And just try to picture it, though. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into the desert. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life, the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must reign for a little while. The beast who was once and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons, and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." Then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torture and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, 'I sit as queen, I am not a widow, and I will never mourn.' Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, Woe, woe, O great city, O Babylon, city of power! In 1 hour your doom has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spices, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and bodies and souls of men. They will say, the fruit you long for is gone from you. All your riches and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out, Woe, woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, Was there ever a city like this great city? They will throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning cry out, Woe, woe, O great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea, and said, With such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No workman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of a bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and the saints, and of all who have been killed on the earth. There's a lot there. Yeah, there's a lot there. And so you see inside there just kind of an understanding a little bit, but let's talk about who is Babylon. Because, we're talking about the prostitute, and again, remember we're dealing with apocalyptic literature. And so it uses imagery and symbols. And so when it talks about this prostitute, it says, it's not one woman, it's a city. Okay? And the city is called Babylon. Okay? Now, Babylon, what is that supposed to mean for us? Well, for the Jew, automatically when you say Babylon, there's a whole history of that. Starting off with the Tower of Babel. And so you go back there, and if y'all remember, the whole thing about the Tower of Babel back in Genesis was that God had told them, Go, spread out, be fruitful, multiply. And they said, nah, we're good where we're at. And so they decided that they wanted to be the ones in charge. And so they decided they were going to build a temple all the way up to God and establish themselves as the rulers and leaders. And of course, God said, no, we're not having that. And so I always stood, and again, if I had my thing, I would have showed you a cartoon of a guy saying, hey, can you pass that brick? And they say, oh, no hablo español. But God confused them, spread out. But that defiant spirit of we want to establish ourselves as God. We don't want to be subservient. We want to be in charge. We want to do this. And so from that point on, that region became synonymous with this government, this society, this culture that was opposed to God. And of course, when you talk about Babylon, in the Jewish mindset, the Old Testament, in fact, most of the Old Testament kind of goes that way. The exile. Babylon becomes the big bad. They're going to come and get you. And so, a lot of folks, when they say that they're talking about Babylon, they would hear that. This is Babylon. But by this time, the city of Babylon was kind of gone. Okay? So that's why a lot of folks say it's not literally Babylon. Though there are some who try to say that Babylon's going to be rebuilt and have a new Babylon. But Babylon also became code word for the newest big baddie on the block. And guess who that was? Rome. In fact, there's a verse in your Bible in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3, where where Peter is writing, and instead of saying Rome, he says, "She who is in Babylon, chosen together with you, sends you her greetings, and so does my son Mark." Now, we all know that where Peter's talking about is Rome. And so Rome became synonymous with Babylon. In fact, we'll look at some of the things that kind of go with this, is that this thing is beast, 7 heads, and is known as 7 hills. But guess what Rome was known as? City of 7 hills. But there's also more to that, because a lot of cities were known as the city of 7 hills. And when he said the city with 7 hills, it meant power. It meant authority. It meant strength.
You think that's where the 7 churches came about?
Well, there's something, no, I think that the number 7 is symbolic. I think it's completion. I think it means that, this is the 7 church. When it says 7 churches, I think it means that these are 7 little churches, but it represents the entirety of the church.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm going to give my two cents. I think this does mean Rome, but also means any society or culture that sets itself up opposed to God. And so that's where, names become symbolic of bigger things. For example, when I say Wall Street, what do y'all think of? Money, right? Banking. Do you think of the literal Wall Street in New York? No. When I say Broadway, singer, plays, right? So the name, the place, became synonymous with what it represented. And so for the world back then, when you said Babylon, they thought of Rome. When we say Babylon, who do we think of?
Correct.
We could say, there's so many different things we could say. And it becomes. Now, I do want to give you one thing about Rome. Eugene Boring, which I think is a great name for a professor. Professor Boring. I mean, how awesome is that? But in his commentary for this, he points out that for many Romans, the great mother goddess, common in the ancient Near East, had become the goddess Roma, giver of all blessings, just as she had previously become Athena for the Greeks. And archaeology has documented the presence of temples to the goddess Roma in Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, but also all the churches to whom John wrote recognize this reversal of imagery that Revelation asserts. Roma, meaning Rome, is not the great mother as they claim, but rather she is a whore. Sorry, but that's the language. And he said, Christians who talk like this were likely not to be thought of as being patriotic. And so they were like, wait a minute, you don't like our society? You don't like what we offer to you? How dare you? And so Babylon sits there and calls. Now, I always think it's interesting that of all the images that they could use, well, give her a green dress, looks better. They called her a prostitute, or, depending on which translation you have, a whore, a harlot. It's not flattering. But one of the things is why? Why use this imagery? And one of the reasons I think is important is that she is seductive. I wish that we could, it's one of those things where if you could see the reality of things, it would change the way you see things. But sometimes you could paint a beautiful picture and make it look so amazing. And so it says a prostitute, and if you go like to Proverbs 7 and read about prostitutes there, the adulteress, how she sits on the corner, calls on the front porch, and just kind of, lifts a little slip up, shows a leg, says, hey, think of the good times we'd have. Think of all the enjoyment you'd have with me. Look at all the things I can give you. And we say, that would never appeal to me.
There's something wrong with you.
There's something wrong with you, yeah. Think about the seductive nature of our world. What are the things, let's start with this. Advertisement. How do advertisers appeal to you?
The good life.
The good life. Think about it. Whenever they show like an alcohol commercial, they never show the man sitting by himself just drowning in his tears and ruin his life. They show a party. Why? Saying, hey, look, you can have this life if you just come with us. You want to be popular, you want the prestige, you want that. This is all that they pull you in. You want to be successful. You want what you deserve. Kind of like, remember when the movie, we talk about Wall Street, the movie Wall Street? Greed is good. And so when you're trying to live a life faithful to God, and this is what is there healing you, it's hard not to be pulled that way. In fact, one of the reasons why the Pharisees came on the scene was because the Hellenistic viewpoint, the Greeks, the hedonism was coming in, and the young Jewish men and women were being pulled that way. They're like, wait a minute, you want me to be wearing all this stuff and I can go to this bathhouse and see naked people? I like that better. I can go have violence and watch people kill each other? Man, this is awesome. And you want me to go to church? That pull, that seductive nature is there. And so, but it also is not just seductive, but think about whenever the Bible talks about idolatry and all that, it's always in the context of adultery. This is symbolic of infidelity. Someone's pulling you away from God, pulling you away from your first love, trying to replace you, to replace God, and it's destructive. That's what Proverbs 7, it tells you, hey, you go down that path, it will destroy you. It will destroy your life, destroy your marriage. Or as Jesus says, what does it gain a man if he gains the whole world? It loses his soul. And so in the church, this is the call we have. Do we look at this? And of course, we say, that would never be appealing to us. Oh, it is. Do you want to follow that, or do you want to follow the cross? Do you want to follow Jesus Christ? And like I said, Rome itself was appealing. Why? Rome was successful. If you did business with Rome, guess what you got? You got rich. And they were able to determine who was the players and who wasn't the players. Okay? Now this is not, I'm not making a statement on anything right here about this. I'm just using this as the illustration. Walmart, okay? I personally love Walmart. I shop there all the time. Okay. But the power that Walmart has, they are the #1 supplier of goods. If you want to sell your things, guess who you primarily have to go through? Walmart. Okay? And so guess what Walmart gets to do? They get to tell you how much to charge for your product. They'll tell you, oh, you're going to sell for that much? No. We'll only put our shelves to do it this much. And if you don't go along with what Walmart wants, guess what?
They don't take you.
They don't take you. And then you're broke. And so if you want what Walmart offers and be rich and all that, you have to play Walmart's game. You have to get in with Walmart. And take the values of Walmart, making them your own. Okay? Take that illustration. How do we succeed in this world? And that's where choices have to be made. And we have to decide. And so, when you go to Babylon, it says here that when you get caught up with it, you get drunk with the adultery that they offer. And that imagery, you think, what does that mean, get drunk? Okay, how many of y'all have got just a little bit of money, and then all of a sudden you get a little bit more money? What happens with that money? You want more of it, right? It just gets you going, okay? When you get a little bit of power, guess what you want? More, okay? And it's where you start to get caught up to where all of a sudden, you're no longer who you're supposed to be. Now you're just drunk. And you're crazy. So, this is what he said, this is what John is saying. Look at this world. This powerful entity, or, we can say it's Babylon, say it's Rome, it could be anything. But you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, I want to be there. That's where all the cool kids are. That's where all the rich folks are. Why do I have to stick to this lamb and follow his ways and be faithful to him? Okay? So, it doesn't take long when you start to get in bed with this, that all of a sudden you start to embrace this. Okay? It's kind of like the whole, again, I'm not preaching politics or anything, so. Lobbyist? Did I spell that right? Why? Okay. Close enough. Y'all know what I mean, right? If you take money from someone, you start to, oh, they're great. I'm not going to be against them. Yeah.
One that's currently on the news now is Sean Petticoat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's got the power, he's got the money, he's got the pull.
Yeah. Yeah. And the things that, you saw where the way that this is so awful, but he basically controlled the hip hop music industry, and he would tell rappers, hey, if you want to be a rapper, you want to be a big guy here, you got to do what I say, which meant that he basically turned them into his own personal sex slaves.
Who are you talking about?
What's that?
Who are you talking about?
Diddy, Puff
You
Diddy.
mean Puff?
Yeah, Pete Diddy.
No.
So now, let me just go to, so this is all the deeper stuff. Now let's just get to it, okay? Who is this? Okay? And this is some of the things we talk about, and I did draw the beast as like I should, with all the 10 heads and all that, or 7 heads and 10 crowns. A lot of folks that look at this, they say that this represents Caesars. That this is Rome, and so the 7 heads are different Caesars. And the problem with that, though, is that no one can agree which Caesars it is. Rome has had lots of emperors, okay? And they're like, do you start at the beginning? Do you start after Christ died? What do you go with this? And then what do you do with the 10 crowns, you know? And so they would say that those are because there was a time when Rome would have one king, another king, another king, another king, another king, and it's like, your king, kill, just assassinate. And so some would say that. Some think that it means different nations. So like at the end of the world, that you're going to have these different nations come together to form one like European Union that would come together and become one big new Rome. One interesting I thought was neat was that they said the 7 heads represent the empires that stood in opposition to God and his people. So they started with Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, then Greece, and the one who is now is Rome, and the one who is to come will be the Antichrist. And they said that that's the 7 things. Some see it as 7 forms of Roman government. It says the kings, consul, dictators, there's all kind of things. This doesn't make sense, but I tell you what I've read. To me, I think there is some meaning to it. I think it says that, I think the number 7 is symbolic. And I think it says complete power, authority. So I think this is a culture of the world that is opposed to God. And then it says in verse 8, the one who once was, is, and yet to come. And it says it's a mystery. Well, understand, when the Bible says it's a mystery, that doesn't mean like you need to get your like little spyglass out and figure it out. It means it's something to be revealed. Something to be revealed to you. That's why it's called the book of Revelation. But when it says who is to come, do you all recognize that phraseology? That's what's used for Jesus. This is a direct mockery of Jesus. And so this is where it says it's to contrast that. And it's basically saying that this Antichrist, or the beast, however you want to call him, that he's going to set himself up to be, I'm your new Christ. I'm your new Savior. I'm the new guy you want to follow. Look what I offer you. Look what I give you. Follow me. And he will entice so many people. But a couple things that I think is neat here is look at what it says in verse where is it? Okay, verse 6. Says, 17.
Make up your mind, is it 6 or 17?
17, verse 6. The last part of that verse, he said, I saw the woman who was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. And when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. And the angel said to me, why are you astonished? Why do y'all think John was astonished? And then it says the people, when they see her, they're astonished.
It sounds almost like,
with her versus staying with the Lord.
Yeah. Shocked. So many went with her instead of staying with the Lord.
and it sounds almost like they recognized her.
They recognized, yeah. Kind of like they recognize, you know, they're like, oh yeah, I see that now. Yeah. Have y'all ever done something and after, or get caught up in something? Why did I do that?
Oh, not me, please.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a good kid.
Okay, you're a good kid. Okay, this is a crass illustration, and I'm sorry if it offends anybody, but this is kind of like, you know, whenever a guy goes on a date and, you know, meets a girl at the bar, and then all of a sudden, did y'all ever hear that song by Alan Jackson, where, you know, when he basically met the love of his life, and he's at a bar, meets the love of his life, he's so happy, he gets married, and then all of a sudden he wakes up and he realizes She's old, she only has one tooth, and she's ugly. It's a hilarious song. But it's more like, that's who you are? Really? That's what I gave everything up for? That's what I followed? And so it's one of the things where you're like, kind of crazy. Another thing, and this is where we just kind of speak about this. So everybody comes, they end up giving their power to the beast, they're all excited, and they're going to make war against the lamb. Okay? They're all excited. We're going to talk more and more about that. But look at verse 13 of chapter 17.
Oh, 17.
Yeah. They will have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. Okay? So there's like, okay, yes. And here's the thing. The devil never likes to share glory or power. Okay? The devil will never partner with you. He will use you. He will take it. So he takes the power, and it says they will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him he is called, chosen, and faithful. Then it goes, the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. Okay? So it means the whole world. Then it says, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now wait a minute. Didn't they just give her power? Didn't they just follow her? Didn't do all that? Why do they hate her now? She lost, yeah. She lost.
They've been deceived.
They've been deceived.
Their lives that they knew and enjoyed have come crumbling down.
Yeah. So it's like if you marry the rich guy, you know, you always have that young girl who marries the old rich man, and then to come find out that he wasn't really rich. You're like, I don't like you anymore. So there's that aspect of it. Also, there's another part to it. Evil can never be united. Evil will always turn upon itself. That's why, you know, criminals never stay together for very, very, very long. This is where I'm going to get really deep with y'all here for a minute. Comic books. There's a series of books called Justice, and it's about the formation of the Legion of Doom. Y'all remember watching Super Friends? You had the Justice League with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman and all that. Then you had the Legion of Doom with all the villains.
With Luther and Maria.
Yeah, and they always lost. Why? Because the villains are all about themselves. They want the power. They want the glory. They want the money. And they are willing to cheat, lie, and steal from everybody else. And so, you ever heard the phrase, there's no honor among thieves?
Superman came in and saved the day.
Yeah, Batman comes in and saves the day.
Superman.
Superman. Leon Morris, I'll give you a quote here. He says, wicked men are not just one happy band of brothers. Being wicked, they give way to jealousy and hatred. At the climax, their mutual hatreds will result in mutual destruction. And I love that. Now, get to chapter 18. I know our time is short, but one thing is in chapter 18, you see that, first of all, how quickly everything dissolves. You know, Babylon, she's this big prostitute and all this, and then all of a sudden, fallen. And then it says in 1 hour, boom. It's quick. And this is what is shocking. We think empires will last forever,
No.
but they never do.
How'd you have 9/11?
Yeah,
Everybody was so content and powerful and
Yeah.
everything, just like that. And they-
just like that. You know, when you see all this, that Babylon build itself up, you think it's going to last forever. You think that they're strong. I mean, go back to the days of here. Rome was invincible. Do you think the church ever imagined that Rome would never be in charge? Go back in our history. Genghis Khan. I mean, he conquered most of the earth. Do we even know where Mongolia is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Think about it. And then this is getting closer to us. When y'all were growing up, did you ever think you would live in a world where the Soviet Union did not exist?
No.
I mean, you thought, man, they're powerful. But they dissolved away. Kingdoms come and kingdoms go. And I love how it describes this. Look at chapter 18. And look at verse 2. With a mighty voice he shouted, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. Now here's one thing I like to point out about this, is that, and we had more time, there's been a wonderful history book, and I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but it's about the downward spiral of civilizations, that he studied every civilization, empire, world power, and looked at the things in common of how they ascended and how they descended, how they fell. And they all have the same things in common. There's 10 things. It's crazy scary, especially when you hold it up to the United States. You're like, oh. But one of the things is, whenever they start down this path of evil, it just gets worse and worse. It spirals downward. It doesn't, have you ever heard the phrase slippery slope?
Yeah.
You go there. My guess is, I want y'all to think about where you were back in the 60s. Okay, if you can remember. Think about some of the choices made in the 60s and the impact they're having today. Would you have ever dreamt we would be in a world where some of the things where we are discussing today, you're like, why are we even talking about this? How is that a thing? Wait, you have a man swimming on the girls' swim team? How? Yeah, how did we get there? Well, this is where it becomes. Goes down. And I'm going to just, one little thing. It will go down and eventually destroy itself. Yep. Babylon will fall. Unless, and this is the big thing, you have revival. Revival changes everything. Okay? That's why people kind of talked last night. People get down on the United States and how bad it is. Hey, there's a revival bubbling up. And people are hungry for the gospel. So, it's a slippery slope. Demons of every kind are getting inside there. And then finally, she falls. But notice the responses. The kings, they are crying. The merchants, they cry. The mariners, they're crying. Why?
The gravy train is gone.
Their gravy train is gone. And this is where, you got to look at the symbolic nature of the book of Revelation, because you're thinking, wait a minute, everything's gone. You're like, wait a minute, everything's been destroyed. Why are you worried about your money when there's 100-pound hailstones coming down? You're like, what? But this is where, when it falls, even though you may not have liked it, you attach yourself to it. And then all of a sudden, you're upset by it. I mean, just to give you some examples. I know where I used to live, we had an opium epidemic. Heroin was bad, prescription medicine was bad, and our sheriff did a great job of shutting it down. There are a lot of folks in the community upset with him about it. You know why? Because guess what a lot of the powerful folks in our community was involved with? Selling drugs. Yeah. You hate to think that it was a politician, but yeah, it was. But think about it. And again, this is just giving you some examples. Let's say that all of a sudden Las Vegas determined that gambling was bad. What impact would that have in Las Vegas? Do you think folks would be upset? It wouldn't exist, exactly. Okay, so we say this, just, you have dictators, like there's a lot of folks who are like, Iran is so terrible, but hey, they were buying our stuff. They were buying our goods. They were buying our oil and all this. Let me bring it a little cheaper, a little bit closer to home. And this, don't get mad at me, okay? But it's kind of like this. We like to buy cheap stuff, right? $5 shirt, Walmart, or Kroger, or wherever you buy them at. What if they shut down the factory in China where that was being made by slave labor, child labor in a sweatshop, where these kids are being forced against their will to make these clothes? And you say, we got to put an end to that. And you do, then all of a sudden you go buy your shirt and it costs $15 instead of $5. Are you mad now?
Oh.
Yeah, that's to be insurance anyway. Yeah. Or in politics, okay, my little soapbox. Cut spending. Just don't touch mine. I still want, as you said, my gravy train. But under that. And so when you look at this, where this falls, Babylon falls, they're all like, oh, you hurt my way of life.
That's too bad.
That's too bad, yeah. And so they're so entrenched in it that they're impacted by his fall. And they grieve his fall. And that's why in chapter 18, verse 4, and this is one of those neat things. So after you hear all this about the haunts, the demons and all this, and think about, this is in context of the bowls of wrath and all this happening. Verse 4, then I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. It goes on. Come out of her. In other words, it's going to look enticing, alluring, give you everything you ever wanted. Don't fall for it. Come out. Be pure. Be holy. Follow the Lamb. Because as great as this looks, it's anti-God. It's opposed to God. Okay? So, yeah.
It's just another way, again, over the entire history of time, every time things went bad, God has given the offer to come back to Him.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You still have time, come back
Yeah.
to me before it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, come back to me. There's always this chance for revival. Until you reject it to the point where there is no more. And that's where he said, that's where the timing in Revelation, I wish when John wrote this, it was just like, phew. Because in chapter 16, it's like, it is done. You wish we just point like that. But there's a point to where it's over. And Babylon falls. So here, to just kind of close with this, there's this constant call to not be enticed by the ways of the world, but to be faithful to God, and not to embrace the prevailing culture. This happens a lot of times within our own lives, within our own churches. For example, I told you before that how do you define a successful church? Yeah, yeah. We used to say that the things that when we had to be judged on this in the United Methodist Church, they cared about money, they cared about how many people you had in the pews, and how big your buildings were. And that's how you define a successful church. Who defined those standards? The people, the world, I was reading this past week, and when I was preparing for this, and there's a mega church here in Texas. I think it's in Houston. It's called the Church Unlimited. Have you heard about that? But it is a very contemporary. When I say contemporary, I don't mean music. I mean worldly influence. For Easter, a while back, and they still do it each Easter, they had door prizes giving away $2 million of stuff. Where they gave cars, they gave TVs, and said, hey, you come to church, you have a chance to win a car. You come to church, you have a chance to win a TV. We'll do this for you. And so you had people coming in, and they were calling out numbers. Are you in seat 10, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, here, come grab your stuff. And their tagline was, this right, come for the loot, leave with Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, and they get.
Yeah, I know what those people were there for.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what they were there for, just for the stuff.
Well, Jesus is not for sale.
He's not for sale. But how were they defining success? And this is what they said. We had, I think it was like 10,000 people in church.
In the first chapters of Revelation, did Jesus criticize these
Yeah.
churches for that very thing?
Very same thing. And that's why there's nothing new under the sun, okay? And so part of this means that as people, individuals, church, when we think about Babylon, we have to think about not only what we do, but what do we condone? What do we approve of? For example, even in our own law, you may not steal the TV, but if you buy the stolen TV, you get in trouble too. Accessory to the fact. You benefit from it. And you say, I just got a great deal. That wasn't me. No, you're sharing in her sins. And that is where it's called to come out. Now, our time's up. I'm sorry. Like I said, we're trying to cover so much because we won't meet next week and we won't meet the week after that. So 2 weeks we won't be meeting because we have Vacation Bible School. Yeah. And so, but the other part about this chapter that is kind of hard is that it says to rejoice. She's suffering. Babylon is suffering. Rejoice over her. You're like, that doesn't sound very Jesus-like.
Well, maybe because it's your last chance.
It's the last chance, yeah. And this is where there is a difference between rejoicing over the suffering of someone and rejoicing in the conquering of evil. And rejoicing over the vindication of things that are made right. And the way that I kind of see this, one of the best endings of a movie trilogy, Return of the Jedi. Darth Vader's defeated, and he's defeated by being redeemed. There's something biblical about that. The evil emperor is gone, the empire has fallen, and everybody's celebrating. They're not celebrating the fact that people are dead, they're celebrating the empire is over. Evil no longer reigns. Goodness reigns now. And that's what this is. And there's language that sounds kind of harsh, but it's meant for you to look at and say, I get what they're saying. I get what they're saying. All right, now y'all, there's so much more that we jumped over. I'm sorry that we skipped over a whole bunch of stuff. But let me ask, are there any questions about 17 and 18?
You did a lot of work on the, hey, I love that.
That is from, I mentioned Eugene Boring. That is from his commentary. And that the thing inside there, it's a compare, contrast, and that's where we're going to go more in depth in that on our screen. But compare, contrast Babylon and the New Jerusalem. And that's where you decide which one you want to go. Okay? And also there's some other similarities. So like the woman on the beast, notice that John is taken away to the desert to see the woman. Remember, we saw that image earlier, I believe in Revelation 12. He was whisked away in the wilderness and saw the woman about to give birth. And so you're like, oh, wait a minute. We compare and contrast these women. And so, and this is where the book of Revelation, I'll be honest, sometimes it's more like a dream. Have you ever had those dreams where it's just like, well, yeah, it's nuts. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But after it's over, you're like, I get it. And that's kind of what's going on here. Okay? Any other things? Chapter 17 and 18?
Are we not gonna finish it when you get back?
Yes, when I get back. But the following week, we have Vacation Bible School.
Okay.
And so I'm doing a class with them.
So we're not gonna have class of 95 to 60?
No, not 16. So we'll follow up with that. And then, y'all, this is where I'm so excited. Chapter 19, Jesus comes back. Okay. Yeah, and gets married. And then we get to talk about the good stuff. Okay? Because there's been a lot of like, oh, you know?
I'm tired of the horns and the.
Yeah, we're tired of the beast and the horn and the dragons and the prostitutes, you know. We get to talk about a new heaven, a new earth. We get to talk about reigning with Christ, about the resurrection. And it's one of those things where, you know, we always think we understand what the resurrection is. You start reading like, wait a minute, how many resurrections are there? You know, and so there's a lot more to go. So,
Pastors had at least two.
yeah.
That we know of.
Yeah. All right. Guys, any other questions or comments?
You're gonna come back, aren't you?
I am, yes. Yes. And I may have a baby with me. I'm going to kidnap him and bring him with me. So.
Will there be a notice when you're a granddad?
Yes. I will send it out. I'll let folks know. I'll tell Tori to put a blast out to everybody. And then I may send a picture, though. My daughter is she's just peculiar about that. She's already said, I don't want anybody posting anything on Facebook, pictures of my baby. I don't want people seeing my baby because they may try to come and take them. I'm like,
She's not wrong.
Yeah.
There have been cases where
yeah,
too much information has gone out and
Mhm.
children have gotten.
yeah. And I laugh because she is like that and she doesn't want to share anything on Facebook or anything like that. Then I got another daughter where she does not have one private thought whatsoever. Everything she shares, we're like, oh honey, you shouldn't have done that. All right, let's go ahead and bow our heads.